Chapter 22. In the Midst of Mysticism. The beckoning of amusement chimed in Meridia's mind, and she thought of venturing about the city to find something to entertain her senses. She knew that she had hours to go before picking up Minnie, and felt invigorated given the day she had already had. If there was any person better suited for navigating the midline between absolute life and death than Meridia, that person would have to have the conversation to end all conversations with her. Her feelings reinforced her idea of herself as a strong-willed woman capable of generating, owning, and mastering her emotional reality. And what, she thought, was a better sign of living the human experience other than the emotional reality each person experiences? Nothing. Her and every other human who ever lived, was living, or will ever live, became the tangled mess of organic matter and energetic pulses to view the world as they would through the course of their lives. Sometimes the entirety of experience in moving through the world would provide the stimulation needed to trigger the entire system of conscious self, and since such a system would overrun the framework of logic used to make sense out of the fluctuating world, such an entirety was best experienced as an emotional reaction. Dissolving the validity of logic and order in a person's life, the emotion gives credence to the idea of life being more than a balance of opposing notions. It lends the beauty of inexpressible ideas to the realm of expression, the concept of infinity to counted numbers, and the illogical that verifies the foundations of logic by proving it is what it is simply by being what logic is not. As convoluted as the thought may seem, it is coherent enough to convey to her the idea of being a ragtag mess of components holding together itself as a defined entity she knows as her self. What she uses to perceive is her, and what she perceives both influences her and can be influenced by her. With thoughts like these, why would she need to find something to influence her in an amusing way? She decided on her course of action and ventured to her apartment, double parking to run in quickly, hoping to give herself incentive to avoid the creature comfort of simply lounging at home. She packed up a set of pencils and charcoal along with one of her pads. She found a folding chair next to the dryer in the laundry closet and ignored the fact that she would need to run a load of her and Minnie's clothes in the not-too-distant future. With the art implements and the folding chair in her hand and under her arm, she closed and locked the door to her apartment and headed in her car to the south side of the Congress Avenue Bridge. It took her longer than anticipated to locate a parking spot that did not come with the chance of her vehicle being towed. She found one 2 blocks further south and made her way to the river. Walking out to the middle of the bridge, she let her eyes scan the area around her to find the spot where she would set up. She did not consider trying to capture the river, and she did not want to hone the set of skills such an artistic endeavor would require. She looked up to the north, where the road ran to the Capitol building. The chair unfolded as though its own power did so. Planted on the concrete of the bridge, she sat and flipped open her pad. The pencils jumped out of their pack, one more so than the others, and her hand held tight to it. Together they transmuted the structures in her line of sight to images on the paper. rendering the larger to a picture that blended her sight with her ability to draw. She did not know how long she could get away with being in the middle of the sidewalk that crossed the river. She did not know if it was legal for her to do such. She thought about the busking musicians all about town who touted their art to the persons who crossed paths with them, and she figured, like some of them, she was not seeking money. She was not really seeking attention as her pencil danced across the pad. She was simply pursuing her artistry. Although she was not seeking attention, she was fully aware of the drivers and passengers in passing cars who at least registered her presence. There were pedestrians who also gave her attention, although most seemed to not become too interested either because they had lives of their own to tend to, or because they, out of respect for the artistry, did not want to risk becoming a distraction to the artist crazy enough to sit on the bridge at midday to draw some of the buildings. She did not seek the attention, but she liked that she was given the attention. She was most likely considered an artist by those who could see her, albeit for fleeting fractions of a moment, as they passed by. The soul of the city is evident in the creative element of the human components, and to a degree she now represented that aspect of the city. The soul that breathes life into the metal and stone structures she was attempting to bring to her vision on the paper. Reason for the laws crafted and for the utilities that web through the urban reality of many people living so many intertwined lives that they barely find time to notice the simple beauty of their place in existence. Complications from all angles of everyone's lives made a madness that she imagined had reason for its own being, and yet here she was drawing, embodying that madness with a frantic pace of her mind and hand. She wondered how many people, seeing her as she sat drawing on the bridge, knew each other. How many were connected in ways they might not even know. And how many were also connected to her? Maybe they had seen her before and never known each other's names. Maybe they were introduced and fell out of each other's scope of attention and awareness. Maybe they were people she would meet in the future at some point, and they would have a giddy moment when both are able to recollect the time she was seen on the bridge at Congress Avenue, sitting in a folding chair and drawing in the middle of the day. As with all artistry, the mind grasps the temporal recognition and twists out of it the functions needed to properly gauge the passing of time. It is as though, by toying with the notions of perfection of certain skills selected by a person, that person stretches the self beyond the boundaries of existence constricted to one life. Be it by affecting others or reaching into a grander forum other than one's own perception, art is the means by which humans can penetrate infinity, or, at least, step closer to it. The forms of artistry can be any action done for its own sake, and are not limited to what is commonly considered to be artistic mediums. The best artists, it could be argued, are those who leave no trace of themselves other than what they stir in others through experiencing their works. Parenting can be an art form, although one with a captive audience. In fact, it might be the original art form in that it drives into being the idea that the audience is needed to conjure it as an art form. Meridia looked at her phone quickly and saw that she had passed about half the time until she would need to retrieve Minnie from school. She looked at her picture, felt the slowed blood flow in her legs, placed her pencils away and closed her pad after removing the picture from the stack of paper. She fiddled with the flecks of pencil lead and brought out her charcoal. She used them to create a shadow scheme on the picture that seemed authentic, yet could not happen at any one point in time in reality, somehow managing to coerce the passage of time into being present in the single image she had created. Very little was needed to convey this portion of the image, and her finesse in having a light touch, literally and metaphorically, was useful in achieving what she felt was the good end point to her creative endeavor. The image complete by her standards, she looked at it and then at the skyline from which she had drawn her inspiration. There was a bittersweet satisfaction in the completion, as now she felt the satisfaction of having done something she had set out to do, yet also felt the sadness that it was not to be hers any longer. Finding parallels of varying degrees to how she will conduct herself as she worked to perfect her artistry of parenting, she admired what she made and claimed no ownership of it, hoping that such an altruistic gesture would work in some mystical way to simply offer to the world a beautiful component. A pedestrian was walking closer to her. She sighed while looking at the picture and glanced up at him. Their eyes met and she smiled, holding out the picture. He raised his hand and shook his head, saying, "No thanks." "I'm not selling it," she clarified. "It is only practice, and if you don't take it, the water of the river will." He stopped, seemingly not knowing to be impressed or offended by her resolve to toss the paper into the water. "I might just throw it out when I can," he said, taking it. "Do what you will with it," she replied, as she adjusted the charcoal in its case and folded up the chair. "It was just practice for me." He had stopped walking and was looking at the picture in his hand. He cocked his head to the side while viewing, and then turned to face the north side of the river. She started back to the south side, getting no more than 3 steps before he called after her. "Hey," he called and shuffled to catch up. "You didn't sign it." He held out the picture. "My signature won't increase the value of this," she said while moving to continue walking. "Maybe not yet, but if I hold on to it and you get famous, I'd be screwed out of a fortune." He still held the paper out. She stopped walking and looked at his youthful smile. She put the chair down and fished her pencil from its box in her purse. "Just so you don't get screwed," she wrote onto the lower right corner of the paper. He looked at it when done. "Mary," he said. "That's me," she replied while putting the pencil back and picking up the chair. "So you draw," he said, "but can you dance?" She put the chair back down and regarded him oddly. "What?" she asked. "I'm Tyler," he said, extending a hand that she shook gently. "And I don't draw, but I dance." She retracted her hand. "Swing dancing, ballroom, some Latin and blues. There's a large set of overlapping dance syndicates in town. And since you got to hand your art to me, I was wondering if you'd be interested in seeing some of the art I do." She looked him over and tried to figure out what he was getting at. He was at least 10 years her junior and clearly aware of that. She decided that he wasn't trying to ask her on a date, but it was a connecting of human artistic personalities that she had not thought would ever occur. I might be too old to dance, she said. Oh, balderdash, he actually said aloud. There are women there much older than you, some who dance me under the table. She cocked her head as he mangled the metaphor usually reserved for drinking. Where I curl into a fetal position, wondering why I can't move as good as they do. And I'm joking. He shifted his weight to rest on one hip. It's just a lot of fun. And who doesn't want to have fun? All right, Tyler. Sorry. It's okay, Mary. Mary. I know. She inhaled to keep herself from giggling at the exchange, and felt a light mist in the air hydrate her sinuses. What would you recommend as my introduction to the dance scene? Take up a free lesson at the Fed on Thursday nights, the Swing Syndicate. It's a great place to start.